today on my friend Erin Burnett's Street Signs program, and you know she's the greatest. We had a great conversation with Bill Gross, my favorite bond manager in the world. Should be yours too because he's the best performing. He's from PIMco. He wrote a very nice piece, his monthly commentary, where he mentioned our show and talked about how there really aren't any bull markets. But in the conversation we had with Bill, he mentioned the fact that there was a piece of paper, that's a Wall Street term for there was a bond deal, a preferred deal, by Wells Fargo, which is another one of our favorite institutions. You know we've been recommending that. And he turned the piece of paper down. He didn't want to be involved in it. He said it was being marketed to retail investors because there was no institutional demand. He said it was a $1.5 billion piece of bank capital from Wells. First of all, I just want to tell you, I feel terrible to ever even get in between on this because I love Bill so much, but I love Wells too. So I felt if there's a clarification needed here about what happened on that piece of paper, we ought to reach out to Wells. They reached out to us. I'm thrilled to have Howard Atkins. He's the Senior Executive Vice President and CFO of Wells Fargo. I think he can help explain this misunderstanding. Mr. Atkins, welcome to Mad Money.
Great to be here.
Look, there are many pieces of paper that happened. Bill Gross was on. He was kind enough to give us the story. But apparently there may be some a difference about between what Bill Gross said about the piece of paper and who it was marketed to and how it did. Can you just fill us in?
Sure, I'd be happy to. This was a $1.75 billion capital security. In fact, it was very much an institutional transaction, so I'm not quite sure why it's being characterized as something different. It's a very standard transaction for Wells Fargo. Over 100 institutional investors invested in the transaction. And in fact, we're probably one of the few large banks these days that even has access to the institutional capital market.
Right. Now, Howard, I wrote earlier in realmoney.com that I had gotten a quote from that this piece of paper, which came at par, Wall Street Jibbers for 100, actually went, you could sell it at 101. Anybody who bought it apparently instantly made a profit.
Right.
Now, could you just explain to people why you do it institutional? Because Bill seemed to think that the institutions didn't have any more money, or at least his didn't want to put any more money into work. And what's the difference between, because I think we have a lot of retail investors who watch the show, what's the difference between a retail investor and an institutional investor when it comes to this piece of paper?
Typically institutional investors, are long-term, sophisticated investors who buy transactions in larger amounts and typically directly through the underwriting systems of the dealers who place the paper. And as I said, in this particular transaction, there was 100 or so institutional investors who showed interest in the transaction.
Right. I think that's important because, again, in Bill's excellent note, he mentioned that he felt that a lot of institutions weren't going to take another bite at the apple until the Treasury deals with some of the mess in Fannie and Freddie. Obviously, if 100 institutions are in there buying, PIMco not being in there did not affect this deal.
Well, again, we think it was a very successful deal. It was well oversubscribed. There are two very important features of this deal, important to us at least. One, it's tax deductible, and that's very, very important because that obviously lowers the cost as an issuer on our side. And secondly, it's callable in 5 years. So we feel that if we don't like the cost in 5 years' time, we'll call it.
Okay, Howard Atkins, Senior Executive Vice President and CFO of Wells Fargo. Thank you so much for being on the show.
Thank you so much.
Absolutely. Now, I just want to tell you that I have been recommending these preferreds, okay? It was a tough time earlier in the year, but this is a great, it's for institutions. And please, my apologies to Bill if he thought that I was even getting away with this thing. But Wells, Bill, these are PIMco, these are fabulous institutions. We want to get everything straight on Mad Money. I hope that helped clarify some of the things that were said earlier. Thank you, and stick with us.